Welcome to In Her Voice. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am passionate about helping women live authentically by listening to their inner voice. Get ready to be inspired by women of all walks of life that have set aside their should-bes and not good enoughs and are standing in their true voice, the voice of wisdom that each and every one of us has inside. Hello, you guys. This is Kelly Covert, and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really want you to know how much I appreciate you, how much I appreciate you saying to me, yes. When you press play, that's what you're saying. You're saying, yes, Kelly, I welcome you into my life. I welcome you into my ears, into my head, into my heart, and I'm so grateful for that. Today, I have Jen Vertanen on the show, and she's going to be digging into the hard topic of loneliness. But you guys, it's so good. There are words in our podcast today that you definitely need to hear. I know that they are meant for you. Before we dive into that, I want to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by Beauty Counter, and you can always move yourself towards your own safer skincare at the same time that you are supporting In Her Voice when you purchase any products through the link that I have in the show notes or your podcast app. And so that is a really great way to take care of you and to support In Her Voice and let me know that In Her Voice is making a difference in your life. And I really, really appreciate you doing that. So let me tell you a little bit about Jen. Jen Vertanen is a coach, mentor, speaker, and writer who encourages people to share the hard-to-tell stories and start to heal the places that hurt. Jen knows the power of telling your story so often that the shame starts to fade away. Her story stems from an emotionally abusive childhood. Jen is also the creator and the host of the podcast Going There with Jen Vertanen, where she shares intimate conversations with people working to heal the places that hurt. She reminds people that we are never alone, even though it oftentimes feels like it. Known for her candor, willingness to go there, especially when it's uncomfortable, humor, and openness, Jen is often thanked for asking the hard-to-answer questions and exploring the dark bits, even when, or maybe even especially when, it's awkward. So let's get right to Jen. You are going to totally fall in love with her, and I can't wait to dig into this very, very important topic of loneliness. Jen Vertanen, welcome to In Her Voice. I'm so excited to have you on today. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. I'm super excited to be here.
Fantastic. And we were talking before we started recording about how lovely it is to have another fellow podcaster on because you sound so beautiful. The sound is so great. And so I just am full of gratitude for you today. In that regard, we have had no technical difficulties, knock on wood. But we're diving into a really interesting topic today, and one that you really wanted to bring to my audience, and that is loneliness. And I think that this is something that we don't often talk about because no one, I think, wants to admit if they're lonely or if they're suffering from that, and B, wants to admit that it might be holding them back or might be keeping them from something amazing in their life. And so I thought that we would start with this question. For you, I know that loneliness has been a theme in your life. Can you describe for us what your loneliness feels like?
Yeah, gosh, where to start? I'm turning 48 soon, so I have quite a history. But I would say it started in my very early 20s, actually, because I'm from a small town, and I never felt like I fit in, and that's not unusual, right? But I went away to college, and I got pregnant almost right away, and I pretty much had to grow up overnight. And even though I was in a sorority and surrounded by friends and acquaintances, when it came time to actually get married, we decided that that's what we were going to do, even though we were barely 20. I didn't know who to ask to stand up for me. And that was really embarrassing. Okay. And so my 20s were spent raising babies and trying to get through school. And I did this myself. I now understand that a lot of it came from my childhood traumas and wounds, but I didn't know that at the time. And so I spent my 20s isolating myself and not being a very happy person, not being a very kind, good person. And then I remarried in my early 30s. And again, I didn't have anyone to really stand up with me other than my brother, my sister-in-law, what have you. But this was my MO, right? I was a lone wolf. I told myself this story that I don't really like people. You know, I'm an okay person. I'm not a very kind person. I'm not a very nice person. And you know what? I don't need people. I have my husband. I have my children. I go to work. That's enough. And it wasn't, right? But that was the story that I had told myself. And the thing is I had so much evidence from the past, from things my parents had said to me that made that a true story. I also had a lot of evidence that didn't fit that story, but of course we don't see that when we're in the nut of it. So fast forward to 3 years ago, I was divorcing my husband, and we were on the very brink. We had told our daughter, and who's 13. This was very traumatic for her, but at that point in time, my husband, who's much more introverted than I am, he was reaching out to all these friends locally. And I had maybe told a couple of girlfriends across the country, but I didn't have family or local people to be a part of my support network. And that's where it really hit me how alone and isolated I was. And it's heartbreaking. And that's why it's important for me to talk about loneliness, is because I did raise my hand and say, I'm lonely. I did make that call out for help. I did put myself out there. And by doing that, I met other lonely people that were just hungry for a connection, and we've now connected. And I'm not lonely anymore. Sure, I have points in time where I'm like, I don't really have anyone to talk to, but it's not true. And now I get to remind myself that I actually do have people. I actually have done that work. And it took me until my 40s to do it.
Why do you think it's so hard to reach out? It's so hard to admit that you're lonely.
Like you were saying, it's filled with shame. It's filled with embarrassment and heartache. And who wants to say, I have no friends? Who wants to say, I feel isolated. I don't feel connected. And yet it's one of our largest killers, loneliness, right? And I think it's that, I'm just as guilty as the next person of putting on the mask, the facade. People at work would have no idea that I was suffering from loneliness. They would think I have this wildly exciting social life outside of work. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. Right. But I think, going back to your question, it's hard because it's hard. It's hard to say my heart feels broken and lonely.
Yeah.
But it's through admitting that and then taking steps around it. Like, that's how you work through it. You can't just sit and do the same thing and expect different results.
Right. And I think what's so interesting is you brought up the word shame. Like, there's a lot of shame around feeling that way. Like, this idea of like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I figure this out? Like, why doesn't anybody want to be around me?
Yeah.
And I think, like, I'm getting really emotional just thinking about that, right? Because I feel that what's really interesting about shame is the minute we start to speak out, to shine light on the thing that we're most ashamed of, that's when the shame goes away. Like, that's when we're free. That's where our freedom comes. And so it's so fascinating to me that the thing that could most set us free is the thing that we are most afraid of.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, how did you find the courage to start speaking out, to start saying, hey, I'm not happy-go-lucky party girl. I'm hurting.
Yeah. I know the exact Facebook post I did, but I'm not remembering the impetus other than what I was going through with my husband. And it turned into a happy story. We actually did stay together and we're very happily married and working through, typical marriage issues ongoing. But it was the realization that even my super introverted husband had a support network and I did not. And I've always been very personally responsible and self-aware. And I was like, you know what? This isn't going to go away. I have the choice here. I can put myself out there. I've always been one who's very good to raise my hand and go first, kind of that annoying, I just want to get it out of the way.
Yeah.
So I think it was like a moment of bravery of just putting it out there of like, hey, I suffer from loneliness. You'd never guess it. That's okay. My guess is there's others that are lonely, either comment here or privately, and we'll go from there.
So what was the response that you got when you put that out there?
Yeah. So it was a lot of me too. Me too. And that's not surprising.
No.
Right? At all, which is the sad thing. But, and some people weren't comfortable commenting publicly, and that's totally okay. I had a lot of invitations for coffee, which was great. I didn't necessarily accept all of them, but I accepted a few of them. And those have become, some of my best friends locally. I have friends worldwide. That wasn't the issue. It was having a local support system for me.
Yeah. Someone that you could touch, someone that could look into your eyes and say, I'm here for you.
Give a hug.
Yeah. What does your support network do for you? I mean, so you went all of this time without one.
Yeah.
And then you realize you needed it. But I think there's like that sort of gray area of like, okay, but like, what do they actually do?
Right. I mean, it's the daily, sometimes weekly check-ins, even via text. It's getting together for the things that we love to do. So for example, my girlfriends and I went to a yurt. So I'm with a group of local women that love trying new things. And so that's what we do together. And we're very heart connected and adventure connected. But it's knowing that I can reach out and say, I'm not doing okay today. I would like some lifting up. And knowing that the person receiving it is not judging, but wants to help lift me up, and that I will do the same for them.
Mm-hmm. You talk a lot on your website about mirroring. And I think this is so important and something that we don't talk about enough and maybe need to practice more. And I feel like it's almost an art to be able to mirror back to someone what they need. Can you talk about what it means to be a mirror for someone?
Yeah, that's interesting because as I shared earlier, my story for a large part of my life was I wasn't a good person. But yet I could also be this mirror back to someone of helping them see what I was seeing in someone. And so I'm very good at reading people. And I think that comes from, an emotionally abusive childhood. You have to become good at reading people for survival. But it's helping them see what they're not able to see about themselves. The good, the bad, all of it, right? It doesn't always have to be a positive mirror. But really, it's that nurturing, tender, loving, empathic mama bear energy, if you will, that is so funny because my story was I wasn't a good person. And yet here I was able to do this for others. It's just the dichotomy does not escape me.
How can you have the juxtaposition of both of those things at once?
Exactly. And so it goes to, I had a lot of evidence one way, and I also had a lot of evidence another way. But unfortunately, I was listening to the evidence that wasn't true, right? But again, that comes from things I had heard and done through the years. And we all have that.
Yeah. Well, and so how do you start to change that conversation? I mean, I think this really comes down to what I love to talk about, like connecting with your true inner voice, the inner voice that says to you, you have these gifts, you have this ability, to mirror back, to hold space for someone. And this is what that means about who you are. How do you go from the story, I am not a good friend, I'm not a good person, I don't like people, to honoring who you really are?
Oh, that's such a big question.
I know, right?
and it absolutely needs answering. It's, again, I don't want to focus on age, but I am in my upper 40s now. And so I've had a lot of experiences through the years. And as I want to say about 7 years ago, I started attending retreats, and I started really trying to take care of my personal needs because they weren't getting met elsewhere. So I would attend retreats, and I would be with groups of women that I had no clue. And I was able to hold this tremendous space for them. And they mirrored that back to me, that I was this very safe, very comfortable, loving space for them to share openly. Right.
Wait, I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Was that a surprise to you?
Yeah. Yes, because it was in those retreats that I felt like I had the first glimpses of who I actually was, that I had a big, expansive heart that could be ripped wide open, and that I could actually feel alive and vibrant. Those were those first glimpses into that. So, yeah, absolutely, it was a surprise. But the more it happened, the more that became part of my story. And it so happened a few years ago that I became estranged from my dad for a number of reasons. And that was like another turning point of, I can only own what I own. I can't own what others own. What is my story? Where do I take it from here? Right. And so it was, and I work in software development. I'm very analytical while also being very right-brained and creative. But it was looking at all this data and sorting through it and saying, what's mine, what's not. These are things that my parents said and did, but I was a little girl, right? Like I tried to protect my mom and my brother, but I came to the realization that wasn't my job. Like I felt like I'd failed, but that wasn't my job. So it just kind of cracked open a whole series of things to relook and reframe and rethink about, and kind of build from the ground up and say, who am I actually? Yeah.
Yeah. And I love doing that child work.
Yeah. Really
Going back to those different times in your life. And I do it in my journal, but there's a lot of different ways you can do it. And, I've actually done like sort of a little meditation podcast about the 5-year-old you. I'll link to it. So you guys can, if you haven't listened to that, it's really short. You can go listen to that. But it's really about taking yourself back and like being with that little girl that you were like now.
Yeah.
And asking her what she needs and understanding what she knows, what wisdom she has inside of her. Because when we're little, we don't have that perspective. We don't have that ability to be able to understand the way we do now. But if we're still carrying the story that we made when we're little with our little child's experiences, right, instead of what we have now, then we're not going to be in our most powerful position to heal ourselves, to be able to take care of ourselves the way we need to be taken care of.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that you speak into is this idea of mothering ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that so much. I just love it so much because I think I had a realization, and I'm a little young, just a little tiny bit younger than you. I'm 43, Jen. And I had a realization several years ago that I was parenting myself the way my mom parented me, which which wasn't serving me, it wasn't helping me. It wasn't empowering me. And that's when I really started to understand that I have to know what I need. I need to mother myself the way I need mothering. Just like I mother my children. I have 2 boys, completely different. They're different. I give them different things because they have different needs. And I need to do that for myself. So talk about what that means for you, and maybe share about how you started to understand what you needed.
Yeah, I think going back to the reasons behind why I became estranged with my dad and not my mom, it illustrated that what I was doing was placing an expectation on my parents that they would never be able to live up to. So shame on me, right? Mm-hmm. Putting expectations on others that they don't have on themselves or aren't able to. In my dad's case, he's not able to. But it was that understanding that if my mom isn't able to be who I need as a mother, and all my adult life, I've been searching for a mother figure, just another woman to take me under her wing and nurture me. And I never found that until my group of local girlfriends. But I so desperately wanted it, to the point that I spent thousands of dollars hiring coaches, life and business, to help provide that. Right. So I paid for a woman to validate me. But it was that realization that I was kind of out of money to do that, to pay for it any longer, but that my mom wasn't able to be the mom that I still need to this day. And in addition, at the time my daughter was 10, and, mothering her. So my oldest is 27 and then 22, and my daughter is 13. So I'm a much different mother now than when I was a lot younger. But I think raising her, being a mother to her, has helped me tap into that mothering for myself. So there's times I give her a hug, and it's not because she needs the hug, it's because I need it. So that's a way of giving myself the touch, the nurturing hug.
Mm-hmm. I've even read, there's a great book by Kristen Neff on self-compassion. And she talks in that book a lot about self-touch, hugging yourself, like rubbing your arms the way you would, rub your child's arms or your child's back. And that can be a really nurturing thing for us to do to ourselves. And we feel silly doing that.
Yeah.
But I know that it works.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I get massage for that reason too. I mean, sure, it feels good, but it's the touch, and not that my husband doesn't touch me or I don't get touch, but it's just it's a different form of touch that I'm missing in my life. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some of your other practices?
I have 2 very large, very furry Newfoundlands.
Oh, I know, right? Best.
And they're like hugging a human. And again, I don't want people listening to think that I don't get this from my family, because I do. But I think the energy of a pet can be very different than the energy of a human.
Well, and let's talk about that, because I think too, it comes down to this idea that a lot of the things that we need to be able to give them to ourselves.
Yeah.
Like even if you're married, even if you have kids, even if you have this amazing support of girlfriends that are holding space for you and mirroring back to you, you still got to be able to give it to yourself, because that will never be enough if you cannot love yourself.
Yeah. So the Newfoundlands, their quiet, strong presence and that fur is just so delectable to just cuddle into. And again, I think it's that very sensory. It's the touch. It's the feeling comfort and grounded.
I so feel you on that. My dog Piper is small and not very furry. But this morning, I had a really rough morning this morning. We have a lot going on in our family right now with our youngest at school, and stressful. Yeah. And I had, my husband stayed home late so we could have a conversation without our kids being home, which is crazy that he has to stay home late from work in order for us to be able to do that. But after he left, I sat on the couch with my coffee, and my dog came and, you know, just snuggled up on my lap. And that's exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
And having that and knowing that that's going to make a difference. And, you know, it's just those little things. Like for me, journaling, sitting still in like my spot, going for a walk, working out with my girlfriends, you know, all of these things are the things that I know can get me out of really, truly out of that lonely place.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a special blanket. It's, you know, there's certain scents that help invoke that mothering for myself. So yeah, it's, you know, I think the point we're making here is it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be very small items that you actually have around you, almost totems, if you will, touch points.
Mm-hmm. So let's get back to the loneliness piece, because sometimes I think people might be like, well, I'm just lonely. There's nothing I can do about it. And it's not really affecting me. I think especially as women, driven, you know, high achievers, we think, oh, well, you know, there may be this feeling of like, either everybody feels like that and they're just pushing through, right? Or nobody feels like that, so I can't say anything. And it's not really holding me back anyway, because I'm kicking butt at work and I'm like mom of the year, right? All of these things, like you say, the mask, but inside we're just not feeling it. So what do you think ultimately loneliness leads us to?
Well, it is that feeling of, I mean, loneliness is isolation and not feeling connected. And I question how on earth can you be a good mother, a good friend, a good partner, spouse, employee, employer, like all of it. If you're thinking that way, you are fooling yourself, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It is so exhausting. And so if you're feeling that way, if you're achieving these things, but you're also feeling that isolation and loneliness and exhaustion, ding, 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 there's your cue. Yeah.
Do you think that some people call it something else?
I think it can mask under sadness, not feeling, you know, just kind of feeling meh.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I ask that because I think it's really important for us as women who want to be connected, who want to be connected with our own inner voice, who want to be connected with deep, soulful relationships with other women, with our loving partners, our children, right?
Yeah.
We've got to be willing to go there.
Yeah, go there.
I know, right? That's the name of Jen's podcast, by the way. We have to be willing to dive into the feelings of meh, of I guess this is as good as it gets, of this isn't what I want, but I guess I'll just be okay with it because it's what I have. Like we have to go there, right? Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's not coming out, or that we really don't have time for in a conversation like this, is it might sound like things happen. It was like point A to point B, and all of a sudden I wasn't lonely. But what you're not getting is there was a lot of that inner digging and excavating, and it was painful, and it was hard and messy. And there's times I'm still going through it as I peel back the layers, because my stuff goes all the way back to early on in my childhood. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I first had to know myself and that I was a good person worthy of friendship and connection. And that does not happen overnight.
How did you work on your worthiness? And I should rephrase that, because we're all worthy, right? Yeah, like it's not like you had to build it up. But how did you come to know that you were worthy?
Oh gosh. The only thing I can, it's having people mirror it back to me.
Yeah.
To give me, I call it evidence, data, showing me that I was, if I showed up and I was true and, you know, tried to keep as many of my masks off, that people really did enjoy me and wanted to have a connection with me, and that I was the one keeping myself isolated.
Yeah. You have to be willing to look for it.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I hear you saying. Like, I had evidence that showed me I was a person who didn't like people, who had a hard heart or whatever. But I also had this other evidence. And it's really about being willing, even giving yourself permission to look for the evidence, to look for the proof that you are worthy each and every day.
Absolutely. Like I said, I still sometimes have to, do that hard work. I think I always will. You don't take a 48-year history and completely undo it. I think the tendency to isolate is so strong that it's going to be a continual battle for me, but it is so worth it. Right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I mean, I can't go back. I can't.
Well, and I think the thing of it is too is, we all have our history. We all have the things in our lives that we wish maybe we could change. But I've gotten to the point now, and I think I hear you saying this too, that you wouldn't change that because that's who you are. That's where your gifts flow from.
Yeah. I call it the silver linings.
Yeah.
I can't undo it.
Right. Well, so like, what are some of your silver linings? We've talked about self-mothering, like learning how to mother yourself, learning that you are a person that's a powerful mirror that can hold space and reflect back. What are some of the other things for you?
It is that I can be a mentor for others that are a few steps behind in their own healing journeys, if you will. That I am. All of my experiences have led me to the ability to go out there now and say, I want to take stigma away from talking about loneliness. I mean, that's not easy to go out there. It's not a popular message to hear.
Right.
And so all those life experiences, like that's one ginormous silver lining, is that I am now able to have more empathy, more perspective, more understanding, more of everything, so that I can go forward and try to help someone feel less alone.
Well, Jen, I can say from the bottom of my heart, I'm so grateful that you are using your literal voice, putting it out there, speaking these words that people need to hear. We need to hear them. And also that you're listening to your own inner voice that tells you, that affirms to you each and every day that you are of great worth and that you are loved. Thank you so much. Why don't you let my listeners know how they can listen to your podcast and all of the other goodies that you have online?
Yeah, so you can find me at jenvertanen.com. Instagram is Jen Vertanen. I really strayed far from my name. And then my podcast is Going There with, wait for it, Jen Vertanen. So if you Google Going There with Jen, you will find me. Fantastic.
Yeah. So I always like to end with my favorite question, and that is, in your life right now, what is your inner voice asking or saying to you?
She is challenging me to show up more, to fight through the fears of being seen, because there is a message to share and work that I need to do. And even last night, I've been having some insomnia, and it's because like she's talking to me, like, get over, you have to move through your fear.
Well, I can tell you now, I see you. And I'm glad that you're putting yourself out there. And I just want to honor the courage and the bravery that it takes to do that. I know deeply what that feels like. Yeah. And I just want to honor that in you right now.
Thank you so much. Thanks for giving me the ability to get my voice out there.
Oh my gosh. It was wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
Oh, wow. I just love that woman. Sometimes you just meet people and you connect with them instantly. And that's what it was like for me with Jen. And it probably doesn't hurt that we both have amazing gray hair, just saying. If you follow her on Instagram at Jen Vertanen, you'll see that. In fact, I think that's how we first connected, which is kind of funny. But I love what she said about self-mothering, about being our own mother and taking that responsibility. It's really about saying, I can give this to myself. And I'm going to take that role on. I'm going to take that responsibility. I'm going to make it happen for me instead of waiting or expecting other people to do it for you. And that's really about being empowered. I mean, that's what it means to be empowered. That's when we're taking our own needs into our own hands. We're giving ourselves what we need. And maybe that looks like a group of girlfriends that you can connect with so you don't feel lonely. Maybe that looks like some friends around the country that you connect with in a phone call or on a Zoom. Maybe that's giving yourself the support of a coach like me, an inner voice coach that's going to help you understand your value, your worth, uncover your gifts, connect with your inner voice and start to feel the joy, the passion, start to take the inspired action and start to really move in a direction that feels good in your life. That's what I do. That's what my work does for the women that work with me. And so if that sounds like something that you are really interested in, and maybe you think to yourself, gosh, I don't know if I can afford it. I don't know if it's exactly what I need. You know what? If it sparks any interest at all in you, I want to encourage you to go sign up for a discovery call with me. And what is a discovery call? It's basically like a mini coaching call. So it's like a 20-minute coaching call with me where we talk about how you're feeling, what's holding you back, what you need to move forward, and what it would look like to work with me. And so, yeah, at the end of it, I do tell you about what the cost is, but that's not all you're going to get out of that call. If anything, you're going to walk away knowing what's next for you, knowing where you need to spend some time working, having a tool to be able to connect with your inner voice. That's my gift to you. I want to give you that. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can click the link in your podcast app or on the show notes. kellycovert.com/discovery is the URL. And like I said, a live link should be right in your podcast notes. So go ahead and sign up. It's free. And I want to give that to you. I want to. It would make me so happy to do that. So as always, I want you to know that you, yes, you, have a superpower, and you may not realize what it is yet, but it is in you. And it is something that only you can do. It is something that only you can do like you. And it's time to find it, and it's time to start using it. You are worthy.